was out of the home. And at that point, I really needed to get real with where I was. Where did I want to go? And then, of course, how did I even get here? Because I got to understand a bit about my past and how I got here before I can truly heal and move forward in an effective way.
Welcome to the Heroes at Home podcast, where we believe heroes can thrive both at work and at home. This podcast is for those who stand watch while we sleep, who run into buildings while others run out, for those who deploy to hard places to have hard fights, and for the families that support them. Through candid conversation, we will discuss the side of things that don't get glorified in the media, what happens when they come home. We'll be talking with heroes from all walks of life and their partners, children, friends, and beyond, so together we can build a stronger family. I'm Noel Keni, CEO, joined by my co-host, Kenny Thomas.
A life of avoidance, compartmentalizing, and just sucking it up and driving on manifested itself in me not knowing how to cope with any of it, and then not being too prideful to admit or ask for any sort of help. And about 5 years ago, I was trying to hold everything together, but God gave me that great and terrifying grace of falling on my face and being found out in an affair outside of the marriage. And had been in about a 3-month affair at the time. And my mindset, I was checked out. I was gone. I was so outside of reality and so far gone from what I'd even remembered. On the outside, looking in, you'd see a beautiful family, beautiful wife, 2 amazing kids, all squared away. And I was living a double life. I was trying to hold all that together as best I can by wearing, whatever mask was necessary to make it through the day, but also escaping reality by chasing fantasy through, seeking affirmation, affairs outside the marriage. And it wasn't the first. And, the reality is that I had been coping for many years with escaping from reality through seeking affirmation from other people. And then I hid because I was afraid, like so many people do when they're scared of losing what they love but don't believe that they deserve.
Yeah, and I think the this element of falling flat on your face is, one that many can identify with, many have experienced. But for you, what was so crucial about that moment? And if it's okay, maybe press a little bit deeper into kind of how did that unfold in your guys' relationship? Because I think it is germane to those who are listening that maybe potentially are either on the side of betrayal or actually are, living that double life, that double standard, and they are in the midst of, considering what's in front of them, or maybe they're not even considering what's in front of them. They they don't realize what is ahead of them, and I think the way this was found out and kind of what transpired was a pretty defining moment in your life. Is that correct?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I would say life altering. I would say that I'd spent the better part of, certainly my marriage and my entire life, creating circumstances that led me to this point where I needed to die, in essence. You can't have a resurrection without a death, right? And so I needed to. And what did that look like? Oh man, it looked like me growing further and further and further away from what was real in a relationship, and then blaming my wife for the reason that we were further and further and further apart. So it was justification. It was, like I said, and I was convinced that, it was done. And I blamed others. I blamed my wife for, circumstances. And leading to this, and I didn't see a pathway forward, and I was completely checked out. So when she started really pushing me, full court press, and her intuition kind of kicked in, and she was like, yeah, all your tricks and stuff that you've played out over the years, like, and certainly Susan will speak to that, and kind of the signs and the things that she was kind of seeing, led us to a place where I got called out, and I couldn't weasel my way out of truth. Because that's what happens when people get scared, right? They're afraid. I was terrified. On one hand, I don't want to lose all of this that I actually really do love, but I've done so much over so long, and it's all come from a root of not believing that I was ever really worthy of any of it. And that gets deep, and we'll talk about that, those origins and those deep roots a little bit later. But that's the reality of how I came to that place. And it took sitting down with some mentors, a pastor who I respected very much as a father figure, who I did not want to meet with. Weird, right? When people are getting ready to call you out and you know it in truth and love, that tends to be a meeting that you don't want to be a part of. But by God's grace, somehow, some way, I made it there to that. And I had to start really facing the reality of where I was. And then I needed to make a choice. Because once the trickle truth started to come out, because I'd love to sit here and tell you that I had the courage to, be expressive of everything that I was dealing with, but that's just simply not accurate. It took me time and feeling incremental pain to realize, wow, bro, you actually got a problem. You got some real issues that are way deeper than the behavior that you're exhibiting.
Yeah, and so one question that comes to mind is for you, Scott. Generally when an affair is found out, or there's that revealing of truth, that moment of truth, it's somewhat of a conceal and hide as much as possible, and allow it over time to then play the course of which it's going to run. Was that true of you? And I guess one way that it's been described is like the trickle truth, right? Like over time things are revealed, and it seems like each time more and more is found out, and it's the damage of that can be so difficult. So for you and Susan, and again, just because we are live on video, Susan, thank you so much for being on this call, and I just want to get your reaction too. So Scott, answer that for me, and then Susan, I want to get your reaction of like when all this came out, like what was kind of your initial feelings and thoughts?
Yeah, I could say for sure I didn't have a clue what I was doing or how to navigate forward. I was on a course where I felt like I was completely alone, had no guidance, no book, no direction on how do you proceed forward in this. And so I've learned a lot since, and I would love to, be able to provide some of those resources to perhaps other people who find themselves in the same scenario that I did. But at the time, I didn't know I didn't know there was an actual process to disclosure. I didn't know, anything about the magnitude. Well, I had a sense of how traumatic it might be, but I didn't understand. I was focused on me. I was focused on my pain, right? And not concerning myself bigger on what is my wife navigating? What does this nuclear bomb of trauma that I've just dropped in her lap look like? And that's kind of understandably why she couldn't be around me anymore. I wasn't safe to her, rightfully so. And we separated, and I was out of the home. And at that point, I really needed to get real with where I was. Where did I want to go? And then, of course, how did I even get here? Because I got to understand a bit about my past and how I got here before I can truly heal and move forward in an effective way.
I love that. And I do want to dig into that. But for a moment, Susan, can you just share with us kind of the initial response, your emotions, your feelings when this nuclear bomb was dropped?
Yeah, so that sit down with Pastor, Scott had revealed, 9 years prior that he had a relationship. And in my mind, I was like, he said relationship, like what in the world? And so, but then he said something else that made me know that there's more. And so, our pastor was like, go home, talk to Susan, get everything out in the open. And so we went home and I just started asking him questions and he started revealing all this information. And I'm sitting here like trying to make sense of it in my head. And it was really, really rough time because I was in shock and I was trying to process the information. And then a few days after that, Scott was saying things like, oh, I need to find like myself and, where I want to be in life. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. He just dropped this bomb on me and he's talking about how he needs to find, and just my intuition really kicked in and I started asking more questions. And so then it came out that he was currently having the affair. And, the 2 weeks were really hard because now that I know I was dealing with some trauma and trying to make sense of things in my head just wasn't a reality at that point. And so for me, I knew that we needed to separate in order for myself to find some stability and some clarity. But still, even after separation, not knowing how to navigate this, there was still more trickle truth that would happen in the weeks following to come. And that ultimately, like, learning more specific information, I was done. And I just couldn't, deal with it at that point.
And I want to save that because for our listeners, we're going to hear from Susan in the next episode where we're going to circle back with her because, when she shares this trickle truth as it started coming out, my natural inclination is to ask the question of, was that helpful or hurtful, right? And I'm sure that there's both sides of that you can share. But for today's purposes, we're just going to press into Scott's story. And so, Scott, I do want to circle back, and Kenny, feel free to jump in when you want. But I want to circle back because I think what is so profound about this story is not just the trauma and not only the affair and being found out. I think that's a pretty commonplace in our society. But it's actually the process that you have since gone on this journey. Like, what does that look like? And there actually is a process for people to be able to, one, deal with for their own sake, their own trauma, but also ultimately to even be able to sit where you guys are sitting today. That didn't just come about because of chance, right? There was design behind that. There was a process in place. There was support around you. So, let's launch into that if that seems like the right point in this journey to kind of really talk about what, now that the truth is out there, Susan knows you're separated. How do you begin to navigate the trauma in your own life, the stuff that you've been holding, suppressing, and repairing a relationship?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And one of the memories that comes to mind straight away is, even though I would embark upon the most painful season in my entire life, and I felt like I've been through a little bit of stuff in life, but this was by far the deepest and most visceral pain that I have ever experienced in my life. But that's key, because had I not felt that pain, I promise you, I wouldn't have done the real deep work to change.